"Mom, are you going to pay cash or put it on a plan?" Caroline's voice echoed throughout the restaurant. 15 people stopped chewing. Wine glasses hung suspended in the air. Cutlery touched plates with a metallic sound that seemed to amplify in the sudden silence. My daughter was standing by the table, holding the bill in her perfectly manicured hands, with those deep red nails she always loved to show off. $30,000. That's what the paper said, which she showed me with a smile that seemed kind but which I knew all too well. $30,000 on prime steaks, lobsters, imported wines, French desserts. I looked around. The empty plates were stacked on the table. The empty wine bottles formed a small collection in the center. No one spoke. Everyone was looking at me. Julian's family, my daughter's husband, watched with that uncomfortable curiosity of someone witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing but can't look away from. I smiled. I opened my purse slowly. My fingers were trembling slightly, but I controlled it. I fumbled inside as if I were getting money. Caroline remained standing, waiting, with that triumphant expression she had worn all night. From the moment I arrived at this place, from the moment I saw it wasn't an intimate dinner as she had promised, I knew this was a trap. It's just a dinner with my husband's family, Mom. She had told me on the phone 4 days earlier. Her voice sounded sweet, almost begging. "I need you to come. Please. It's important to me. It will just be us, and maybe 2 or 3 other people. Nothing formal. A simple barbecue." I hesitated. I always hesitated when Caroline asked me for something in that voice. But she was my daughter, my only daughter, and it had been months since we had almost seen each other. I arrived at the restaurant at 7 o'clock in the evening. The place was elegant, too elegant for a simple family barbecue. The lights were dim, there was soft piano music, and a waiter in a black suit greeted me at the entrance asking for my name. When I said I was with Caroline, he led me toward the back of the room, and there I saw them. A huge table, decorated with white flowers and candles. 15 chairs occupied. 15 people I didn't know. Well, I knew Julian, Caroline's husband, and his parents, whom I had seen twice in my life. But the others were strangers. Uncles, cousins, siblings, in-laws, all dressed as if they were going to a wedding. And me, in my simple floral dress, the same one I wore to church on Sundays. Caroline saw me arrive and stood up immediately. She walked toward me with open arms. "Mom, you made it," she said, hugging me quickly, just for a second. Then she took my arm and led me to the table. "Look, everyone, this is my mom, Helen." Some smiled. Others barely nodded. I sat in the chair they indicated, between 2 older ladies who were talking to each other without paying attention to me. Julian raised his glass. "A toast to family," he said. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine, which someone had filled with red wine without asking. The wine was bitter. I didn't like it, but I drank it anyway. The dinner began. The waiters brought plates and more plates. Enormous cuts of meat, cuts I had never seen. Someone ordered a prime skirt steak. Another ordered a double-cut New York strip. I heard Julian's mother order lobster. I watched as Julian ordered another bottle of wine, this time one that cost $200, according to the waiter. No one asked me what I wanted to eat. Caroline ordered for me. "Just bring her a mixed grill," she told the waiter. They brought me meat, a lot of meat. I ate little. I wasn't hungry. I had a knot in my stomach that grew with every passing minute. I watched my daughter. She laughed loudly, talked with her hands, told stories. She looked happy. She looked perfect in her tight black dress and her pearl necklace. She looked like someone who had everything under control. I thought about my apartment. That small place where I had lived for 3 years. A studio apartment with a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom that always had problems with the hot water. The walls had dampness. The windows didn't close properly. In winter, the cold came in from everywhere. But it was what I could afford on my pension. $600 a month. That was all I had. $600 for rent, food, medicine, everything. Caroline knew. Of course, she knew. She had visited me once, a year ago. She came in, looked around with an expression I couldn't decipher, and said, "Mom, you should find something better." But she never offered to help, never asked if I needed anything. The desserts arrived: tiramisu, chocolate mousse, artisanal ice cream. Caroline ordered champagne. To celebrate, she said. No one asked what we were celebrating. The glasses were filled again. I didn't touch mine. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 10 o'clock at night. I wanted to leave. I wanted to go back to my damp, cold apartment, but it was mine, where no one looked at me like that, where no one expected anything from me. But then the waiter arrived with the bill. He placed it on the table on a small black tray. Caroline grabbed it before anyone else. She opened the leather folder. Her eyes scanned the numbers, and then she smiled. That smile I knew so well. She stood up slowly. Everyone looked at her. "Well, family," she said loudly, as if giving a speech. "We've had a wonderful night. The food was delicious, the wine excellent, and the company even better." She paused. She looked at me. "All of this has been possible thanks to my mom, who so generously offered to pay for this dinner." The silence was immediate. I felt all eyes turn to me. Julian's mother set her glass down on the table. His father cleared his throat. Julian looked at Caroline with an expression I couldn't decipher, and my daughter remained standing, holding the bill, waiting. "So, Mom," she said, walking toward me with slow, calculated steps. She stopped right next to me. She placed the bill in front of me. "Are you going to pay cash, or put it on a plan?" $30,000. The letters seemed to dance before my eyes. $30,000. That was more than 4 years of my full pension. That was more money than I had ever seen together in my entire life. I looked at Caroline. She held my gaze with that perfect smile, waiting for me to do exactly what she knew I would do. Lower my head, apologize, maybe cry, say I didn't have that money, be embarrassed in front of all these people. That's what she expected. What she had planned. That's why she invited me. That's why she lied about the intimate dinner. That's why she put me in this situation. My fingers touched the edge of my purse. The fabric was worn, old. It was the same purse I had used for years. I didn't have money to buy a new one. Inside, there were exactly $83. That was all. $83 that had to last me until the end of the month. 12 days left, I thought. 12 days to pay the rent, buy food, pay the electricity. And there was my daughter, standing next to me, waiting for me to pull out $30,000. Julian's mother cleared her throat. It was a small sound, but in that absolute silence, it seemed like thunder. I saw her lean toward her husband and whisper something in his ear. He nodded without looking at me. One of Julian's cousins, a young woman with her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, picked up her cell phone and placed it face down on the table, as if she wanted to give her full attention to what was about to happen. Caroline was still there, motionless. Her right hand held the bill firmly. Her red nails shone in the candlelight. I remembered when she was a little girl and we used to play painting our nails with markers. She must have been 6 or 7 years old. She would laugh every time I drew tiny flowers on each finger. "When I grow up, I'm going to have beautiful nails, Mom," she would say. And I would tell her they were already beautiful. That she was beautiful. That little girl was now in front of me, turned into a woman who had just humiliated me in front of 15 strangers. I opened my purse slowly. Everyone leaned in slightly, trying to see what was inside. I took out my small wallet. I placed it on the table. The synthetic leather creaked. Caroline looked at it. Her smile widened. "Perfect, Mom," she said with that sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "I knew I could count on you." I opened the wallet. The bills were folded, wrinkled. I took out one $20 bill. I put it on the table, then another 20, and another, and another. 3 $10 bills. A $5 bill. Coins that I counted one by one. The metallic sound filled the silence. 10 cents. 25 cents. 5 cents. $83 lay scattered on the white tablecloth. It looked like so little, so insignificant next to that $30,000 bill. I looked up. Caroline had stopped smiling. She was looking at me with narrowed eyes, confused. "This is all I have," I said. My voice came out firmer than I expected. $83. It's all the money I have until the end of the month. The silence deepened. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Caroline's mother-in-law let out a sigh. One of the uncles, a heavy-set man with a mustache, looked away. Caroline was still standing, but now her hands were trembling slightly. The bill fluttered between her fingers. "Mom, this isn't funny," she said. Her voice had lost its sweetness. Now it sounded tense, annoyed. "I'm not joking, Caroline," I replied. "This is all my money. My pension is $600 a month. I pay $400 in rent. The rest I use for food and utilities. This," I pointed to the bills on the table, "is all I have left." I saw her face change. The confusion turned to discomfort, then to something that looked like embarrassment, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. "But Mom," she said, lowering her voice a bit, "you told me you would be delighted to treat us to dinner, that you wanted to celebrate with us." I felt something break inside me. I never said that. "Caroline, you called me 4 days ago. You told me it would be an intimate dinner, that it would just be you, Julian, and maybe his parents. You asked me to come because it was important to you. You never mentioned there would be 15 people. You never mentioned you expected me to pay." My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking in my lap. I hid them under the table. Julian cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. He looked uncomfortable, as if he wanted to disappear. "Caroline," he said in a low voice, "maybe there was a misunderstanding." She turned to him quickly. "There was no misunderstanding," she replied. Her voice was sharp now. "My mom knows perfectly well that this dinner was to celebrate your promotion at the firm. She offered to help." I stared at her. That lie came out of her mouth so naturally that for a moment I doubted my own memory. But no. I remembered that phone call perfectly. I was in my apartment, getting ready, when the phone rang. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Caroline sounded rushed, as always. "Mom, I need you to come to a dinner on Saturday. It's important. Just us. Please." I had said yes because I hadn't seen her in months. Because she was my daughter and I missed her. Julian's mother cleared her throat again. This time she spoke. "Excuse me, Helen," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was something in her tone that made me sit up straight in my chair. "I don't mean to pry, but I'm a little confused. Caroline told us that you wanted to get to know us better, that you had insisted on organizing this dinner for the whole family." I felt the heat rise in my neck. All eyes were on me again. "I didn't organize anything," I said, looking directly at Julian's mother. "I didn't even know you would all be here until I arrived." The woman blinked. She looked at Caroline, then at her husband, then back at me. "I see," she said simply, but her expression said much more than those 2 words. Caroline dropped the bill on the table. The paper made a dry sound. "This is unbelievable," she said. Her voice was now trembling with rage. "You're embarrassing me in front of my husband's family." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but they held me. "No, Caroline. You put me in this situation. You lied to me. You brought me here knowing perfectly well that I don't have this money." I took a step back, away from the table. I live in an apartment where dampness comes through the walls, where the hot water only works twice a week, where I have to choose between buying medicine or buying food when the month ends. My voice broke slightly on the last sentence. I took a deep breath. "You know this, Caroline. You visited my home a year ago. You saw how I live." She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her eyes were shining, but I couldn't tell if it was from tears or fury. Julian stood up. "Helen," he said, "I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding here." I shook my head. "There's no misunderstanding, Julian. Your wife planned this. I don't know for what purpose, but she planned it." I took my purse from the table. The $83 were still there, scattered on the white tablecloth. I picked them up, one by one. My hands were shaking so much that I dropped some coins. They rolled across the table. No one moved to help me. I picked them up myself, bending down between the chairs. When I straightened up, I saw a woman at the end of the table, an older woman with white hair and glasses, looking at me with something that looked like compassion. I put the money in my wallet. I closed my purse. I looked at Caroline one last time. "I gave you everything I had when you were a child," I said. My voice came out as a whisper, but I know everyone heard me. "Your father died when you were 12 years old. I was left alone. I worked cleaning houses, babysitting, doing whatever was necessary so you could study, so you could have nice clothes, so you wouldn't lack anything. Caroline looked down. I never asked for anything in return. I just wanted you to be happy, to have a better life than mine. I swallowed. But this, what you did today, I don't understand it, Caroline. I don't understand why. No one spoke. The restaurant continued with its soft piano music. At other tables, people ate and laughed, oblivious to what was happening here. A waiter passed by with a tray of glasses. Life went on as normal for everyone except us at this table. I took another step back. I'm leaving, I said. The bill is yours. I didn't ask for any of this. I turned to leave, but then I heard a voice. It was the white-haired woman who had looked at me with compassion. Wait, she said, standing up. The white-haired woman stood up slowly. She was older than me, maybe 75 years old, but she moved with an elegance that I had lost long ago. She wore a beige dress and a string of pearls that looked real. Her glasses rested on the tip of her nose, and she looked at me over them with gray eyes that seemed capable of seeing things others couldn't. Please, don't go yet, she said. Her voice was soft but firm. Everyone at the table turned to look at her. Caroline watched her with an expression I couldn't decipher. The woman walked around the table to where I was standing. Her steps were slow, measured. When she reached my side, she placed her hand on my arm. Her skin was soft, warm. My name is Eleanor, she said. I am Julian's aunt, his father's older sister. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Eleanor looked toward the table, specifically at Caroline. I think I need to understand something before this night ends, she continued. Her voice was still soft, but there was steel in it. She turned to Caroline without letting go of my arm. Caroline, dear, 3 weeks ago when you invited us to this dinner, you told us that your mother insisted on organizing it. You said she wanted to meet the whole family because she felt lonely and needed to be surrounded by people who appreciated her. Those were your exact words. I remember it very well because I was very moved. I thought it was beautiful that a mother wanted to connect with her son-in-law's family like that. Eleanor paused. No one at the table moved. Julian had placed his hands on the table and was staring at his empty plate. His mother had visibly paled. Caroline opened her mouth, but Eleanor raised her free hand. Let me finish, please. You also told us that your mother had insisted on paying for everything because she had received an inheritance a few years ago and wanted to do something special with the money. You said she was very generous and that it would be an insult if we offered to pay. That's why none of us brought enough money tonight. That's why we ordered without looking at the prices. I felt something twist in my stomach. An inheritance. I had never received any inheritance. My husband died leaving nothing but debts that took me years to pay off. Eleanor must have felt my tension because she squeezed my arm slightly. But now, she continued, now it turns out that Helen knew nothing about this dinner. She didn't know there would be so many of us. She didn't organize anything. And she definitely doesn't have an inheritance to pay a $30,000 bill. Her voice had become harder. So, I need someone to explain to me what is really going on here, because clearly there's a version of this story we're not understanding, or there's someone who has blatantly lied to all of us. The silence that followed was different from before. This silence was heavy. With truths that were about to come out, whether they liked it or not, Caroline finally spoke. Her voice sounded shaky, almost childish. Aunt Eleanor, I thought Mom had that money. She never told me she was living in such difficult conditions. I thought she was fine financially. When I called her to invite her, I assumed she could help with the expenses. It was a misunderstanding. Eleanor stared at her. A misunderstanding, she repeated. It wasn't a question. It was a statement loaded with skepticism. Caroline, you visited your mother a year ago. You saw her apartment. She just told us you saw how she lives. So it wasn't a misunderstanding. You knew exactly what condition your mother is in, and yet you brought her here, put her in this humiliating situation, and planned to leave her with a debt she cannot pay. Eleanor's voice had risen just a tone, but the impact was as if she had shouted. Julian stood up. Aunt, I think you're being too harsh. Caroline made a mistake. That's all. Eleanor turned to him with surprising speed for her age. A mistake, Julian, is forgetting to buy milk at the grocery store. A mistake is being late for an appointment. This is not a mistake. This is deliberate. Your wife lied to this entire family, made us accomplices in her plan, and worst of all, she humiliated her own mother, a woman who, by her own words, sacrificed everything for her. Julian paled. He opened his mouth, but said nothing. He sat back down slowly. His father, who had been quiet all this time, finally spoke. Eleanor is right, he said. His voice was deep, tired. This isn't right. None of this is right. He looked at Caroline. I think we owe Helen a very big apology. And I think we also owe her an honest explanation about what the hell is going on here. Caroline sank into her chair. She put her hands over her face. Her shoulders were shaking. For a moment I thought she was crying, but when she pulled her hands away, her eyes were dry. She just looked tired, defeated. Fine, she said in a barely audible voice. You're right. You're all right. She took a deep breath. I knew Mom didn't have money. I knew exactly how she lived because I saw it with my own eyes a year ago. That horrible apartment with dampness on the walls. The bathroom that doesn't work right. The tiny kitchen where one person barely fits. She looked at me directly. And I was ashamed, Mom. I was ashamed to see my own mother living like that. I was ashamed that Julian might see it one day. I was ashamed of what his family would think if they found out. Her voice broke, but she continued. So I stopped visiting you. I stopped calling you as often. I kept you away from my life because I didn't want anyone to know. The words fell on me like stones. Each one hurt more than the last. Eleanor squeezed my arm again. Caroline kept talking. But then Julian got that promotion. His family wanted to celebrate. They wanted to have a big, special dinner. And suddenly everyone started asking about you. Aunt Eleanor asked if she would meet you soon. Julian's mom said it would be nice if you were included. And I panicked. She ran her hands through her hair. So I came up with this stupid plan. I thought if I brought you here, if I put you in a situation where you had to admit in front of everyone that you didn't have money, then they would see it wasn't my fault, that I wasn't responsible for your situation, that you were just like that, without resources, and that I couldn't do anything about it. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. You wanted to humiliate me, I said. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper. You wanted everyone to see that your mother is poor, so they wouldn't blame you for not helping me. Caroline nodded slowly. The tears finally began to roll down her cheeks, but they didn't seem like tears of remorse. They seemed like tears of frustration, of pent-up anger. Yes, she said. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted. Because I'm tired, Mom. I'm tired of feeling like everyone expects me to rescue you. Of feeling like I should be doing more for you when I have my own life, my own marriage, my own expenses. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Julian and I just bought a house. A big, beautiful house in an exclusive neighborhood. It cost $500,000. We're paying a huge mortgage. We have 2 new cars. We go out to dinner every week. We go on vacation twice a year. She looked at me with something that looked like defiance. And you live in that horrible apartment, and I know everyone thinks I'm a terrible daughter for not helping you, but no one understands the pressure I feel. No one understands that I also have the right to enjoy my life without feeling guilty all the time. Eleanor let go of my arm. She took a step toward Caroline. Her expression had changed completely. There was no compassion in her eyes now. So this dinner, Eleanor said slowly, wasn't a celebration. It was a public trial. You wanted us all to see Helen fail to justify your abandonment of her. Caroline didn't answer. Eleanor shook her head. I am 76 years old, Caroline. I have seen a lot of cruelty in my life. But this, what you did to your own mother, the woman who raised you alone, who worked until she broke so you could have an education, a better life, this is something I cannot and will not understand. She turned to Julian. You knew about this. It wasn't a question. Julian shook his head quickly. No, Aunt, I swear I didn't know. Caroline told me her mother was excited to come to dinner with us, that she had offered to help with the expenses. I never would have agreed if I had known the truth. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. I believe you, but now that you know the truth, What are you going to do about it? Julian looked at Caroline. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at his whole family sitting around that long table. I'm going to pay the bill, he said finally. The whole bill. And I'm going to take Helen home personally, and I'm going to apologize to her on behalf of my wife for this terrible situation. Eleanor nodded. That's a start. I was still standing, motionless, trying to process everything I had just heard. My daughter had used me. She had brought me here to deliberately humiliate me. To get rid of her guilt at the expense of my dignity, I felt something cold expand in my chest. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't anger. It was something deeper. It was the final understanding that the little girl I had raised, whom I had loved with every fiber of my being, no longer existed. In her place was this woman, who looked at me with resentment from across the table. I took a step back. Then another. My legs moved on their own, taking me away from that table, away from those looks, away from my daughter, who was still sitting with her hands over her face. Eleanor reached out her hand to me, but I shook my head. I couldn't accept any more kindness in that moment. Not when I had just discovered that my own daughter saw me as an embarrassment, as a problem she needed to get rid of. Julian stood up again and tried to approach me, but I raised my hand, stopping him. No, I said. My voice came out firmer than I expected. I don't need you to take me home. I don't need your compassion or your apologies. The only thing I need is to get out of here. I grabbed my purse tightly, feeling the insignificant weight of my $83 inside. That money had to last me 12 more days. 12 days to eat, to survive. And my daughter knew it. She had always known. I walked toward the restaurant exit without looking back. I heard voices behind me, murmurs. But I couldn't make out the words. I didn't care. I just wanted air. I needed to be out of that place where the smell of grilled meat and expensive wine turned my stomach. I reached the door, and the same waiter who had greeted me when I arrived opened it for me with a professional smile. I stepped out onto the street. The cold night air hit my face, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe completely. The street was lit with old-fashioned lanterns. Couples were walking, laughing, holding hands. Cars passed by slowly. Everything seemed so normal, so oblivious to what I had just experienced. I stood there on the sidewalk, not knowing where to go. My apartment was 30 blocks away. I could take a bus, but that would cost me $2. $2 I needed for other things. I started to walk. I had barely taken 10 steps when I heard hurried footsteps behind me. I turned and saw Eleanor approaching. She had a sweater over her shoulders and her purse in her hand. She was walking fast for her age, and when she reached my side, she was slightly out of breath. "Helen, please wait," she said. She stopped in front of me and looked at me with those gray eyes that seemed to read my soul. "I'm not going to let you walk home alone at this hour of the night. I have my car parked 2 blocks away. Let me take you." I shook my head. "That's not necessary, Eleanor. You've already done enough. I don't want to be a burden to anyone else." She frowned. "A burden," she repeated. "That's exactly the word your daughter used in there, that she feels you're a burden. Well, let me tell you something, Helen. You are not a burden. You are a woman who deserves respect, dignity, and support. And if your own daughter can't see that, then I will for her." She took my arm gently but firmly. "Come on. My car is nearby. I'll take you home and we can talk on the way if you want, or we can be silent if you prefer. But I'm not leaving you alone after what just happened." There was something in her voice, in the way she looked at me, that broke the last defense I had left. I nodded. We walked together down the dark street. Eleanor didn't let go of my arm the entire time. When we got to her car, a silver sedan that looked well cared for, she opened the passenger door for me. I sat down and the seat was soft, comfortable. It smelled like lavender. Eleanor went around the car and sat in the driver's seat. She didn't start the engine right away. She just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, looking straight ahead. "I lost my husband 3 years ago," she said suddenly. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "We were married for 52 years. 52 years of waking up next to the same person, of sharing coffee in the mornings, of arguing about silly things and making up before bed." She turned to look at me. "When he died, My children wanted me to move in with them. They said it was dangerous for me to live alone at my age, that I needed supervision, care. But I knew the truth. I knew they saw me as a responsibility, as something they had to manage, as a problem to be solved. She smiled sadly, so I refused. I told them I preferred to live alone, in my own house, with my own schedule and my own life. And you know what I discovered, Helen? I discovered that it's better to be alone and at peace than to be surrounded by people who see you as a burden. Loneliness hurts less than rejection, disguised as obligation. Her words struck my chest. I felt the tears finally come to my eyes. I had managed to hold them back all night, but now, in the safety of this car that smelled like lavender, with this woman I barely knew but who seemed to understand me better than my own daughter, the tears began to fall. I cried silently. Eleanor said nothing. She didn't try to comfort me with empty words. She simply reached out her hand and took mine. She squeezed it gently. We stayed like that for several minutes, me crying, her holding my hand. Outside, life went on. Cars passed. People walked. The world kept spinning, indifferent to my pain. When the tears finally stopped, I wiped my face with my hands. Eleanor handed me a cloth handkerchief from her purse. It was white, with initials embroidered in the corner. I took it and dried my face. "Thank you," I murmured. "There's nothing to thank me for," she replied. She started the engine, and the car came to life with a soft purr. "Now, tell me where you live, and I'll take you home." I gave her the address. She nodded and started driving. The ride was silent at first. I looked out the window, watching the illuminated city streets go by. Tall buildings, closed shops, restaurants, still full of people dining. I thought about Caroline, about the girl she had been. I remembered her first day of school. She was 6 years old and terrified. She clung to my leg and begged me not to leave her. I knelt down to her level, dried her tears, and told her she was the bravest girl I knew, that she could do anything she set her mind to. And she believed me. She walked into that school with her head held high. When she came out at the end of the day, she ran to me with a huge smile, telling me about her new teacher and her new friends. I was so proud, so incredibly proud of my brave daughter. Where had that girl gone? At what point did she transform into this woman who saw me as an embarrassment? "You're very quiet," Eleanor said softly. "I'm just thinking," I replied. "About how we got to this point? About what I did wrong?" Eleanor glanced at me while driving. "You didn't do anything wrong, Helen. You raised your daughter the best you could. You gave her education, values, opportunities. What she decided to do with all that is not your responsibility. I wanted to believe her. I really wanted to believe her. But there was a voice in my head that insisted I must have done something different. I should have been stronger, more successful. I should have given her more. The problem," Eleanor continued, "is not what you did or didn't do. The problem is that we live in a world that teaches people to be ashamed of where they come from. Caroline managed to get out of poverty, got a good education, married a man from a well-off family, and instead of being grateful for the sacrifice you made so she could have all that, she decided to erase her past. She decided to erase you. We reached a red light. Eleanor stopped the car and looked at me completely. But I'll tell you something, Helen. You are not her past. You are a real, present woman who deserves to be treated with dignity now. You are not an embarrassing story she can hide. You are her mother. And if she can't honor that, then the problem is hers, not yours." The light turned green. Eleanor started driving again. We turned a corner and I recognized my neighborhood. The streets were narrower here, the buildings older. There were no picturesque, old-fashioned lanterns like in the restaurant area. Here, the lights were harsh white fluorescent, making everything look rawer, more real. "It's there," I said, pointing to my building. It was a gray concrete block of 5 floors. The paint was peeling in places. One of the first-floor windows had a crack repaired with duct tape. Eleanor parked the car in front of the entrance. She turned off the engine. We sat in silence for a moment. "Thank you for bringing me," I said finally. "And thank you for everything you did at the restaurant. You didn't have to. You don't know me. You have no obligation to me." Eleanor smiled. "You're right. I don't know you well, but I know injustice when I see it. and what your daughter did to you was deeply unjust." She rummaged in her purse and took out a card. She handed it to me. "This is my phone number. I want you to call me if you need anything. I don't care what time it is or what day. If you need to talk, if you need help, if you just need someone to remind you that you're not alone in this world, you call me." I took the card. It was simple, white, with her name and number printed in black letters. "I can't accept this," I said. "I can't be a burden to you too." Eleanor sighed. "Helen, listen to me carefully. Friendship is not a burden. Mutual support is not a burden. What is a burden is living feeling like you can't ask for help, that you don't deserve kindness, that you have to survive completely alone because asking for something makes you weak or annoying. That is a burden. And I'm not going to let you carry it anymore." She put her hand on mine again. "Keep that card, and use it when you need to. Please." I put the card in my purse, next to my $83. I opened the car door, and the cold night air hit me again. I got out slowly, feeling the weight of the whole night on my shoulders. Eleanor got out too. She walked me to the building's entrance. The lock had been broken for months. The superintendent said he would fix it soon, but that soon never came. I pushed the door and it opened with a creak. The hallway smelled of dampness and old food. The ceiling light flickered. Eleanor looked around without saying anything, but I saw her expression change slightly. It wasn't disgust, exactly. It was more like a contained sadness. "I live on the 3rd floor," I said. "There's no elevator." She nodded. "I'll walk you to your door." We climbed the stairs together. The steps were worn in the center from years of use. On the 2nd floor, someone had left a bag of trash in the hallway. The smell was strong. We kept climbing. When we reached the 3rd floor, I searched for my keys in my purse. My hands were still shaking a little. I finally found the keys and opened the door to my apartment. The space was as small as I remembered. One room that served as a bedroom and living room. A kitchen that was barely a corner with an old stove and a refrigerator that made constant noise. A tiny bathroom with broken tiles. The walls had dark patches of mildew that had grown since last winter. The window didn't close properly, and I could feel the cold draft coming in. This was my home. This was the place where I lived while my daughter slept in a $500,000 house. Eleanor came in behind me. I heard her take a deep breath, but she made no comment. She walked to the center of the room and looked around slowly. "How much do you pay for rent here?" she asked finally. $400 a month, I replied, closing the door. "It's the cheapest I could find in a relatively safe neighborhood." Eleanor nodded. She went to the window and ran her hand over the frame. "I can feel the dampness," she said. "This isn't right, Helen. This place isn't safe. The dampness can cause serious health problems, especially at our age." I knew she was right. I had already started to feel pain in my joints. I coughed more often, but there were no alternatives. "Not with my pension. It's what I can afford," I said simply. "There's nothing else I can do about it." Eleanor turned to me. There was determination in her eyes. "Maybe there is something we can do," she said. "But first I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Your daughter mentioned an inheritance. She said, 'Your husband left something when he died.' What really happened with that?" I sat in the only chair I had, an old wooden chair with a slightly wobbly back. The exhaustion of the whole night was finally catching up to me. "My husband died 14 years ago," I began. "He worked in construction. One day there was an accident on the site. Obiam fell. He didn't stand a chance." I paused, swallowing the lump that always formed in my throat when I remembered that day. He didn't leave life insurance. He didn't leave savings. What he left were debts. Debts from a loan he had taken out to buy tools, to invest in his work. It took me 5 years to pay it all off. Eleanor listened in silence, standing in the middle of my small apartment. "But we had a house," I continued. "It wasn't big or luxurious, but it was ours. We had bought it years before, when Caroline was little. We were still paying it off when he died. After his death, I kept paying the mortgage, working at whatever I could. I cleaned houses, babysat, did laundry, whatever was necessary. I looked at my hands, wrinkled and marked by years of hard work. When Caroline turned 18 and went to college, things got harder. I wasn't young anymore. Getting work became more complicated. I couldn't do heavy physical labor like before. I got up and walked to the small window. Outside, I could see other gray buildings, other illuminated windows with lives I didn't know. One day, 3 years ago, Caroline came to visit me at the house. She had already graduated, had a good job. She was dating Julian. She told me she had met a lawyer who could help me refinance the mortgage, get better payment terms. I was behind on several payments. The bank was threatening to take my house. Eleanor took a step toward me. "What happened then?" she asked, though she probably already knew the answer. Caroline took me to the lawyer's office. He was a young, very friendly man. He explained about documents, legal terms. I didn't really understand. He said I just needed to sign some papers to protect the house, so the bank couldn't take it. My voice broke a little. I trusted her. I trusted my daughter. I signed everything they put in front of me without reading it carefully, without really understanding what I was signing. 2 months later, I continued. I received a notice from the bank. It said the house had been sold, that I had 30 days to vacate. I didn't understand anything. I called Caroline desperately. She didn't answer my calls. Finally, I went to her apartment. When I managed to talk to her, she explained that she had bought the house, that the papers I signed were sales documents, not refinancing. She said she did it to save me from losing the house to the bank, that now the house was in her name, but I could keep living there without paying rent. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, there was contained anger in them. "But it wasn't like that, was it?" she said. I shook my head. I lived there for 6 more months. Then Caroline told me she needed to sell the house, that she and Julian wanted to buy their own house and needed the money from the sale as a down payment. She told me it was temporary, that she would help me find another place. She sold the house for $150,000, I said. The words came out now like a river that had been held back for too long. I had paid that mortgage for years. There was less than $50,000 left to pay. That means there was almost $100,000 in equity that I had built with my work, with my effort. But since the house was in her name, all that money went to her. She gave me $5,000 and told me it was to help me start over. $5,000 out of the $100,000 that belonged to me. Eleanor sat on my bed, the only other surface to sit on in the apartment. She put her face in her hands. "My God, Helen, your daughter robbed you. There's no other way to say it. She made you sign fraudulent documents, and she stole your house, your equity, your security." I stared at Eleanor, not knowing what to say. I had never thought of it as theft. She was my daughter. I had trusted her. But now, hearing her say it out loud, the truth was undeniable. Caroline had taken everything from me. She had left me with nothing while she used my money to build her perfect life. With that $5,000, I found this place, I said, gesturing around. I paid the deposit. I bought some used furniture. I paid for food for the first few months. The money ran out quickly. Since then, I've been living on my $600 pension. That's all I have. Eleanor raised her head. Her eyes shone with determination. "Do you still have the documents you signed that day? The copies of the sale? Anything to prove what happened?" I went to the small closet I had against the wall. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept important papers. There was an old shoebox where I put everything. Bills, receipts, documents. I took it out and put it on the bed next to Eleanor. She opened the box and started looking through it. I sat in the chair again, watching her. Her hands moved quickly through the papers. Occasionally, she made small sounds, murmurs of confirmation or surprise. After several minutes, she pulled out 3 documents and put them on her lap. "Here it is," she said. "The property transfer document. And here is the sales document for the house. And this." She held up a third paper. "This is a sworn affidavit you signed saying you received the full value of the house in cash." I leaned forward. "But I never received the full value. I only received $5,000. Eleanor nodded. "Exactly. This document is fraudulent. And if we have proof that you only received $5,000, we can prove there was fraud." Do you have bank statements from that time? Any record of those $5,000? I thought for a moment. Yes. Caroline gave me a check. I deposited it into my account. It must be in my old bank statements. Eleanor stood up. She paced back and forth in the small apartment space. I could see her mind working quickly, processing information, putting a plan together. Helen, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What your daughter did is illegal. She made you sign documents under false pretenses. That's called fraud. And then she forged documents saying, you received money you never got. That's forgery. With the right evidence, we could take this to a lawyer and get back what belongs to you. I shook my head. I can't afford a lawyer, Eleanor. I can barely afford food. And besides, she's my daughter. I can't sue my own daughter. Eleanor stopped in front of me. She knelt down to my level and took my hands in hers. Helen, your daughter betrayed you in the worst way possible. She used your trust, your mother's love, to rob you of everything you had. And then she abandoned you to survive alone in this horrible place, while she enjoyed a life of luxury with your money. Her hands tightened on mine. You don't owe loyalty to someone who did this to you. You don't have to protect her. She didn't protect you, and as for the money for the lawyer, I have a nephew who is a lawyer specializing in fraud. His name is Manuel. He's good at what he does, and he's a good person. I'm going to call him tomorrow morning, and I'm going to ask him to take your case. If he needs retainers or payments, I'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about that. I tried to pull my hands away, but she wouldn't let me. I can't accept that. You've already done too much for me. I can't let you pay for my problems. Eleanor smiled sadly. Helen, I'm 76 years old. My husband left me well taken care of financially. My children are established. They have their own lives, their own families. I live alone in a house that's too big with more money than I need. Let me do this. Let me help you, not out of pity, but because it's the right thing to do. Because someone needs to stand by you and fight for you since your own family won't. The tears returned to my eyes. For the second time that night, I cried. But these tears were different. They weren't just from pain. There was something else in them. Something like hope. Eleanor hugged me. It was a firm, warm hug. It reminded me of the hugs my mother used to give me when I was a child, when the world seemed too big and scary. We stayed like that for a long time. When we finally separated, Eleanor stood up and took out her phone. I'm going to send you a text right now so you have my number, she said as she typed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out and saw her message. It simply said, Eleanor, call me when you need to, for anything. I put the phone away. She started gathering the documents from the box. I'm going to take these if you don't mind. I need Manuel to review them. I promise I'll take care of them, as if they were my own, and I'll return them when we're done with all this. I nodded. I didn't have the strength to argue. Eleanor put the documents in her purse. She went to the door, but before opening it, she turned to me. You're going to be okay, Helen. I know it doesn't seem like it now. I know you feel like the world collapsed tonight, but you're going to be okay. And we're going to make your daughter pay for what she did. Not for revenge, but for justice. Because what she did to you cannot go without consequences. She opened the door. The dark hallway of the building stretched out behind her. Rest tonight. I'll call you early tomorrow to tell you how it goes with Manuel and Helen. She paused. You're not alone anymore. You have to understand that. You're not alone anymore. She left. I heard her steps going down the stairs. I closed the door and stood there in the middle of my tiny apartment. The silence was absolute. Outside, the city continued with its constant noise, but in here, everything was still. I walked to my bed and sat down. My legs wouldn't support me well anymore. The exhaustion was overwhelming. I looked around. This horrible place, these walls with dampness, this broken window. This had been my home for 3 years. 3 years living in miserable conditions while my daughter slept on luxury sheets in a house that I had paid for. The anger I had been holding back all night finally came out. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just allowed myself to feel it. That burning rage that seared my chest. My daughter had robbed me. She had used me. She had humiliated me. And all this time, I had remained silent. I had accepted my situation as if it were my destiny, as if I deserved to live like this. But not anymore. Something had changed tonight. Seeing Eleanor, a complete stranger, defend my dignity with more ferocity than my own daughter ever had, showed me something I had forgotten. It showed me that I deserved to fight for myself too. I got up and went to the small mirror hanging by the bathroom. I looked at myself. My face was tired, marked by years of work and worry. I was 66 years old, but I looked older. The suffering had left deep marks. But my eyes still had life. They still had strength. That night, standing in front of that mirror in my miserable apartment, I made a decision. I was not going to be a victim anymore. I was not going to let Caroline trample on me anymore. I was going to fight. I was going to get back what was mine. And if that meant confronting my own daughter, then I would. I got ready for bed. I put on my old nightgown and got under the thin blankets that barely protected me from the cold. But that night, despite the cold, despite the dampness, despite everything, I was able to sleep, because for the first time in 3 years, I had something I had been missing for a long time. I had hope. The phone rang early the next morning. I was still in bed, looking at the ceiling with the damp stains that seemed to form maps of imaginary countries. I took the phone from the nightstand. It was Eleanor. "Good morning, Helen. I hope I didn't wake you." Her voice was energetic, full of purpose. I sat up in bed, clearing my mind of sleep. "No. I was already awake," I replied. My voice sounded hoarse. Eleanor continued without pause. "I spoke with Manuel first thing this morning. I told him your situation, and he glanced over the photos of the documents I sent him. He is very interested in the case. He says there are very clear elements of fraud and that we can definitely proceed with legal action. He wants to meet with you today, if possible. I can pick you up in 2 hours. Does that work for you?" I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. I had time to get ready. "Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Eleanor." After hanging up, I sat on the bed for several minutes. The reality of what I was about to do was beginning to set in. I was going to sue my daughter. I was going to legally confront the person I had carried in my womb, whom I had raised, whom I had loved more than my own life. I got up and went to the bathroom. The hot water wasn't working again. I washed my face with cold water. The mirror reflected the image of a tired, but determined, woman. I dressed in my best clothes, which wasn't much. A brown dress I had bought at a thrift store, black shoes that were worn but still presentable. I combed my gray hair and pulled it back into a simple bun. I didn't have any makeup. I hadn't bought any in years. When Eleanor arrived exactly 2 hours later, I was waiting at the building entrance. I got into her car and she smiled at me. "You look nice," she said. It was a kind lie, but I appreciated it. The drive to Manuel's office took 20 minutes. Eleanor told me about her nephew on the way. Manuel is 42 years old. He specializes in civil law and financial fraud. He's worked on several cases of family fraud, especially cases where older people are deceived by their own children or relatives. He's patient, understanding, and very good at what he does. We arrived at an office building downtown. It wasn't luxurious, but it looked professional and well-maintained. We took the elevator to the 5th floor. Manuel's office was at the end of the hall. A gold plaque on the door read his full name. Eleanor knocked, and a male voice invited us in. Manuel was a man of medium height, with black hair with some gray at the temples and metal-framed glasses. He wore a shirt and dark tie. He stood up from his desk when we entered and extended his hand to me. "You must be Helen. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Manuel Herrera." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. We sat in the chairs in front of his desk. The office was full of law books and filing cabinets. There were framed diplomas on the wall and a family photo on his desk. Manuel opened a folder in front of him. "Well, Mrs. Helen, my Aunt Eleanor has told me about your situation, and I have preliminarily reviewed the documents she sent me. I must tell you, you have a very strong case. What your daughter did constitutes fraud by inducement to error and possibly forgery of documents." I shifted nervously in my chair. Manuel continued. His voice was calm and professional. As I understand it, your daughter took you to a lawyer under the pretext of refinancing your mortgage, but the documents you signed were actually property transfer documents. That's correct, I nodded. Yes, that's how it was. I thought I was saving my house from the bank. Caroline told me those papers would protect me. I trusted her because she's my daughter. Manuel wrote something in his notebook. And after the property was transferred to your daughter's name, she sold the house for $150,000. Of that money, you only received $5,000. Do you have any proof of that transaction? A check, a bank transfer, something that shows the exact amount you received? I took out my wallet and from it, I pulled a folded piece of paper I had brought. It was a copy of my bank statement from 3 years ago. I had looked for it that morning in my document box after hanging up with Eleanor. Here it is. The $5,000 deposit Caroline made. It's the only large transaction in my account in that entire year. Manuel took the document and studied it carefully. He smiled slightly. This is excellent, Mrs. Helen. This document, combined with the fraudulent sworn affidavit where it says you received the full value of the property, is sufficient proof of fraud. We can proceed with a civil lawsuit against your daughter for fraud, unjust enrichment, and forgery of documents. We could also seek criminal charges, although that would take more time. I was silent for a moment. The reality of what I was hearing was overwhelming. Manuel noticed my expression, and his tone softened. Mrs. Helen, I understand this must be very difficult for you. Suing a child is never easy, but you need to understand that what your daughter did was not a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate and calculated act to strip you of your assets. If you do nothing, she keeps everything, and you continue to live in poverty. Is that what you want? I shook my head slowly. No, I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't want to be invisible anymore. I don't want her to get away with it. Manuel nodded. Then we will fight for your rights. The process will be like this. First, we will file a civil suit against your daughter demanding the return of the money that rightfully belongs to you. That would be approximately $95,000, which is the equity left in the house after paying the outstanding mortgage. We will also sue for damages, which includes the cost of having to live in inadequate conditions for these 3 years. Additionally, we will seek to have her pay the legal costs of the process. He paused. Now, I need to be honest with you. Your daughter will probably hire her own lawyers. She will deny everything. She will say you knew what you were signing, that it was a voluntary decision, that she gave you the money as a favor and not an obligation. She will try to make you look bad. It will be a painful process, and she will probably say very hurtful things about you. Are you prepared for that? I took a deep breath. I thought of Caroline, of how she had looked at me in the restaurant, of how she had planned my public humiliation, of how she had stolen everything from me and then abandoned me. Yes, I said with a firm voice. I am prepared. Manuel smiled. Good. Then we will start immediately. I need you to sign some documents authorizing me to represent you, and I need you to tell me everything, from the beginning. Every detail, every conversation, every document you signed, everything will be important. We spent the next 2 hours in that office. I told him everything. I told him about my husband's death, about the years of hard work, about how I had paid the mortgage little by little. I told him about Caroline's visit, about the lawyer who deceived me, about the documents I signed without understanding. I told him about the $5,000, about having to leave my home, about finding that horrible apartment where I now lived. Manuel listened to it all, taking notes constantly. He asked specific questions, asked for details, dates, names. Eleanor stayed by my side during the entire conversation. Her presence was a silent comfort. When I finished telling him everything, Manuel closed his notebook. Mrs. Helen, I'm going to be very clear with you. This case is going to take time. It could be months, maybe a year, but I firmly believe we are going to win. The evidence is on our side. The truth is on our side. He stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. He took out several forms. I'm going to need you to sign these documents. They are the legal representation papers and the authorization to proceed with the lawsuit. The fees will be covered by Eleanor initially, and when we win the case, they will be deducted from the amount your daughter has to pay you. I signed every document he put in front of me. My hand trembled slightly, but my determination was solid. When I finished, Manuel gathered all the papers and put them in a new folder with my name written on the cover. Very well. I will start preparing the lawsuit today. In about a week, it will be ready to be filed with the judge. Once filed, your daughter will be formally notified. She will have 30 days to respond. After that, the discovery process will begin where both parties present evidence. And finally, we will have the hearing where the judge will make a decision. He paused and looked at me directly. Mrs. Helen, once we file this lawsuit, there is no turning back. Your relationship with your daughter, if any still exists, will likely end completely. Are you sure you want to go ahead? I thought about the last 3 years. About the cold nights, the scarce meals, the loneliness. I thought about how Caroline had used me the night before, how she had deliberately humiliated me. I thought about the house I had lost, the money that was stolen from me. Yes, I said, I am completely sure. I don't have a daughter anymore. I lost my daughter the day she decided to steal everything from me. What's left now is just a stranger who needs to be held accountable for what she did. 10 days passed. 10 days of waiting that felt like an eternity. Manuel had filed the lawsuit just as he promised. I was still living in my damp apartment, but something in me had changed. I no longer felt defeated. Every morning I woke up with a purpose. Eleanor called me every day to see how I was, to remind me that I wasn't alone. She had invited me to her house twice for tea and talk. Her house was beautiful, full of light and memories of a life well lived. She showed me pictures of her husband, of her children when they were little, of trips they had taken together. And I talked to her about my life, about my memories with my husband before he died, about Caroline when she was a sweet girl who hugged me every night before bed. Eleanor listened without judging, without offering easy solutions that didn't exist. She was simply there, present, real. On the 11th day after filing the lawsuit, I received a call from Manuel. His voice sounded different, more serious. Mrs. Helen, I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. Your daughter has just responded to the lawsuit, and there are some developments we need to discuss in person. My heart leaped into my throat. Eleanor picked me up half an hour later, and we went together. During the drive, she took my hand. Whatever it is, we'll face it together, she said. When we arrived at Manuel's office, he was waiting for us. There were several documents scattered on his desk, and his expression was serious but not defeated. We sat down, and he pushed a document toward me. Your daughter has hired a rather expensive law firm. They have filed a response denying all allegations. They say you signed the documents voluntarily, that you understood perfectly well that you were transferring the property to Caroline's name, and that the $5,000 you received was a gift from her, not payment for the house. I felt the anger rise in my throat. That's a lie. She told me it was to refinance. She never told me I was selling my house. Manuel raised his hand. I know, Mrs. Helen, and that's why we have a strong case. But there's something else. Your daughter's lawyers have also filed a countersuit. They are alleging that you owe Caroline money. They claim she lent you $20,000 over the years to help you with medical and personal expenses, and that you never paid her back. I was speechless. Eleanor leaned forward. That's ridiculous. Helen lives on $600 a month. Where would she get $20,000 to pay someone back? And where is the proof of these alleged loans? Exactly what I argued, Manuel said. I asked them to present evidence of these loans. Signed contracts, bank transfers, anything. So far, they haven't presented anything concrete. It's a delay tactic, a way to put us on the defensive, but it's not going to work. I took a deep breath. Caroline never lent me $20,000. She never lent me anything. The only $5,000 I received from her was after she sold my house, and that wasn't a gift. It was my money. Manuel wrote something in his notebook. I'm going to need you to prepare a detailed statement of all financial transactions you had with your daughter over the last 5 years. Every penny she gave you, if she gave you anything. Every conversation about money you remember. Everything will be useful to refute their countersuit. I nodded. Manuel continued. Now, there's also something I need to tell you. Caroline's lawyers have requested mediation before going to trial. It's a process where both parties meet with a neutral mediator to try to reach an agreement without a lengthy trial. It's your right to accept or refuse mediation. What do you prefer to do? I looked at Eleanor. She looked back at me without pressuring me in either direction. The decision was mine. I want the mediation, I said finally. I want to see her face to face. I want her to look me in the eyes and tell me all those lies directly. The mediation was scheduled for 2 weeks later. During those 14 days, I could barely sleep. I rehearsed in my mind what I would say to Caroline, the words I would shout at her. But I was also afraid to see her, to face the person she had become. The day came. Eleanor accompanied me to the building where the mediation would take place. It was a neutral place, a government office building designed specifically for these processes. We arrived early. They seated us in a small waiting room with uncomfortable chairs and old magazines. Manuel arrived minutes later with his briefcase full of documents. "Remember, Mrs. Helen," he said, sitting next to me. "Stay calm no matter what they say. Don't let yourself be provoked. We are the ones with the evidence. We are the ones with the truth on our side." I nodded, but my hands were shaking. Eleanor took them in hers. "You're going to be fine," she whispered. The door opened. A middle-aged woman in a gray suit invited us in. She was the mediator. We entered a conference room with a long table in the center, and there was Caroline, sitting on the other side of the table with 2 men in expensive suits, her lawyers. Julian was sitting next to her, looking uncomfortable. Caroline looked at me when I entered. Her expression was cold, calculating. There was nothing left of the girl I had raised in that look. We sat on our side of the table. The mediator sat at the head and opened a folder. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Morales, and I will be the mediator in this case. The purpose of this session is to try to reach an amicable agreement between the parties without the need to proceed to a full trial. Everything said here is confidential and cannot be used in court if the mediation does not result in an agreement. Understood?" We all nodded. Julia continued. "All right, let's start with the plaintiff. Mrs. Helen, please briefly explain your position." I cleared my throat. I looked at Caroline directly as I spoke. 3 years ago, my daughter took me to sign documents that she told me were to refinance my home mortgage. She told me she was helping me not to lose the house to the bank. I trusted her because she's my daughter. But the documents I signed were not for refinancing. They were to transfer ownership of the house to her name. She then sold the house for $150,000. Of that money, which was mostly mine because I had paid the mortgage for years, I only received $5,000. She kept $95,000 that belonged to me. That is theft. That is fraud. And I want my money back. My voice came out firmer than I expected. Caroline looked at me with an impenetrable expression. One of her lawyers, an older man with gray hair, cleared his throat. "Madam Mediator, my client completely rejects these allegations." Mrs. Helen signed the documents voluntarily. A lawyer was present who explained everything to her. She understood perfectly well that she was transferring the property to her daughter. Furthermore, my client has been extremely generous to her mother over the years, lending her money on multiple occasions, money that was never repaid. Manuel intervened. "With all due respect, counsel, where is the proof of these alleged loans? So far, you have not presented a single contract, a single receipt, a single bank transfer to support that claim. In contrast, we have clear documentation showing that Mrs. Helen only received $5,000 after her daughter sold the house. We have the bank statement to prove it. We also have the fraudulent sworn affidavit stating she received the full value of the property, which we know is false." Caroline's lawyer was about to respond, but Julia raised her hand. "Please, gentlemen, we are here to find a solution, not to debate. Miss Caroline, I would like to hear your version directly from you, not from your lawyers. Can you explain your perspective?" Caroline sat up straighter in her chair. When she spoke, her voice was controlled, almost cold. "My mother is suffering from mental confusion. She signed those documents knowing exactly what she was doing. I helped her because she was about to lose her house. I saved her from ending up on the street. And yes, I kept the money from the sale because I needed it for my own house. But I gave her $5,000 as help, money I had no obligation to give her. I stared at her, this woman in front of me, saying I was mentally confused, denying her own deception with such tranquility. "Caroline," I said. My voice trembled, but I continued. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you didn't lie to me. Tell me you really explained to me that I was selling my house. Tell me you didn't deliberately deceive me." She held my gaze. "I didn't deceive you, Mom. You just didn't understand. And now you're trying to blame me for your own mistakes." Something broke inside me upon hearing those words. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. An absolute clarity that this person in front of me had chosen her path, and there was no way to make her come back. Manuel placed documents on the table. "Miss Caroline, here we have the property transfer document dated 3 years ago. Here is the sales document for the house 2 months later for $150,000. And here is Mrs. Helen's bank statement showing a single deposit of $5,000 from you. We also have this sworn affidavit where Mrs. Helen supposedly confirmed receiving the full value of the property. But the numbers don't add up, do they? If she received the full value, why does her bank account only show $5,000? Caroline's lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something. She shook her head. Julian, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Caroline, maybe we should consider reaching an agreement. This is getting out of hand." Caroline looked at him with furious eyes. "I'm not giving her anything else. I've given her enough." Eleanor, who had been quiet, spoke for the first time. Her voice was soft but full of authority. "Caroline, I was at that restaurant 2 weeks ago. I saw what you did to your mother. I saw how you publicly humiliated her. I saw how you deliberately planned to put her in a situation where she would have to admit her poverty in front of strangers. And now you are here, sitting at this table, lying about mental confusion when we both know the truth. Your mother trusted you with the most valuable thing she had, her home, the result of years of work. And you betrayed her in the cruelest way possible." Caroline stiffened. "You don't know anything about my relationship with my mother. You have no right to have an opinion." Eleanor smiled sadly. "You're right. I don't know everything. But I know enough. I know your mother lived in an apartment with dampness and cold while you slept in a $500,000 house that she paid for. I know she is 66 years old and lives on $600 a month while you have 2 new cars and vacations twice a year. I know that 2 weeks ago you tried to leave her with a $30,000 debt for a dinner you organized. And now I know that on top of all that, you are willing to lie under oath to protect the money you stole from her." Caroline's older lawyer banged the table lightly. "Ma'am, please, these accusations are inappropriate for a mediation." Julia, the mediator, intervened. "He's right. Let's maintain respect. But I think it's clear that both parties have very different positions. Miss Caroline, your lawyer mentioned you lent money to your mother. Can you provide evidence of those loans now? That might help clarify the situation." Caroline looked at her lawyer. He opened his briefcase and took out some papers. "We have here handwritten receipts that my client kept of money she gave to her mother on different occasions. They totaled $20,000. Manuel took the papers and examined them. His expression changed to one of disbelief. "These receipts are all written in the same handwriting, with the same ink, and on the same type of paper. The dates supposedly range from 3 years ago to 6 months ago, but it's obvious they were all written at the same time, probably a few days ago. This is fabricated evidence." Caroline's lawyer paled slightly. Caroline stood up. "I don't have to listen to this. I came here to try to resolve this in a civilized manner, but clearly my mother is being manipulated by people who just want my money." I stood up too. We looked at each other from opposite sides of the table. "Caroline," I said, and my voice came out with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "Your whole life I gave you everything I had. I worked until I broke so you could have an education, clothes, food. When your father died and we were left alone, you never lacked anything because I sacrificed. And all I asked in return was for you to be happy, to be a good person, to remember where you came from." I paused. "But now I see that I failed. I didn't teach you to be grateful. I didn't teach you that money isn't worth more than dignity. I didn't teach you that you protect family. You don't betray them." Caroline opened her mouth, but I continued. So, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to follow this lawsuit to the end. I'm going to stand in front of a judge and I'm going to tell the whole truth. And when I win, because I am going to win, I'm not going to feel satisfaction. I'm only going to feel sadness for the daughter I lost somewhere along the way. Julian stood up and put his hand on Caroline's shoulder. Caroline, please, this has to stop. Give your mother back what belongs to her. It's not worth destroying what's left of your family for money. Caroline shook off his hand. You don't understand anything. That money is mine. I used it for our house, for our life. If I give it back to her, we lose everything. Julian looked at her with an expression I had never seen. There was disappointment in his eyes. Then maybe we deserve to lose it, he said in a low voice. If everything we have is built on what we stole from your mother, then it's worth nothing. Caroline looked at him as if he had slapped her. The mediator cleared her throat. I think it's clear we're not going to reach an agreement today. I am going to recommend that this case proceed to trial. I will give both parties 1 more week to reconsider their positions. If there are no changes, the judge will schedule the hearing. We gathered our things. Caroline and her lawyers left first. Julian stayed behind. He approached me before leaving. Mrs. Helen, I am so sorry for all of this. I didn't know. If I had known the truth from the beginning, I never would have allowed this to happen. I nodded. I know, Julian, but now you know. And you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. We left the building. Outside, the sun was shining. It was a beautiful day. Eleanor hugged me. You did very well in there. I'm proud of you. Manuel put his documents in his briefcase. Mrs. Helen, we are going to win this case. The evidence is on our side. The truth is on our side. We just need patience. The following weeks were difficult, but different from before. I no longer felt alone. Eleanor visited me frequently. She had helped me find a better apartment, one without dampness, with hot water that worked. She lent me the money for the move and the deposit, insisting I pay her back when we won the case. The new place was small, but bright. It had a large window that let in the morning sunday. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe without feeling the weight of mold in my lungs. The trial took place 2 months later. The courtroom was full. Eleanor sat behind me. Her presence was a constant comfort. Caroline was on the other side with her lawyers. Julian did not come. I found out later that he had separated from her a week after the mediation. The judge, an older man with white hair and a serious expression, reviewed all the evidence. The documents, the bank statements, the declarations. He heard my testimony where I told the whole story from the beginning. He heard Caroline's testimony where she insisted that I had understood everything and that it was my fault for not reading the papers correctly. Manuel presented evidence that the supposed lawyer who was present when I signed the documents had been hired by Caroline, not by me. He presented evidence that the sworn affidavit about receiving the full value was fraudulent. He presented the fake receipts Caroline had tried to use to prove the invented loans. The trial lasted 3 days. On the last day, the judge announced his verdict. After reviewing all the evidence presented, he said, I have come to the conclusion that Miss Caroline acted fraudulently by inducing her mother to sign documents under false pretenses. The evidence clearly shows that Mrs. Helen believed she was signing refinancing documents, not property transfer documents. Furthermore, the sworn affidavit about receiving the full value of the property is clearly false, as evidenced by the bank statement. Therefore, I order Miss Caroline to return the sum of $95,000 to her mother, plus accrued interest over the 3 years since the sale of the property, which totals $107,000. Furthermore, Miss Caroline shall pay the legal costs of the process and a fine of $5,000 for presenting falsified evidence. The gavel strike echoed in the room. Caroline turned pale. I sat motionless, processing the words. I had won. Justice had prevailed. 6 months later, after Caroline had exhausted all her appeals and finally paid what she owed, I moved into a better apartment. It wasn't luxurious, but it was comfortable, safe, and mine. I put the rest of the money into a savings account. For the first time in years, I didn't have to worry about how to pay the rent or the food. Eleanor became my best friend. We had coffee together every week. We talked about life, about our memories, about our plans. She taught me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people you choose, the people who choose you. I never spoke to Caroline again. I heard she sold her big house and moved into something smaller, that Julian divorced her, that she lost many friends when the story became known. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing it. I only felt a deep peace from knowing I had done the right thing. One afternoon, sitting in my new apartment with a hot cup of tea, looking out the window at the sunset painting the sky orange and pink, I thought about everything that had happened. I had lost my daughter, but I had found myself. I had learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. That dignity is priceless. And that sometimes the most important people in your life aren't the ones you're born related to, but the ones you find along the way. I smiled. For the first time in years, I smiled with true peace. This was living. This was freedom.